hyperreality ended up being a dystopia because it tried to connect with something that we could really see, or I could really see happening with the current trajectory of technology.
Welcome to a new episode of XR and AI Spotlight, the show where we give the stage to creative, technologists, entrepreneurs, founders who are pushing the boundaries at the intersection between XR and AI. My name is Gabriele Romagnoli, I'm your host, and today I'm here with Keiichi Matsuda. He's director of Liquid City, a design practice on the bleeding edge of XR, working with the world's top technology companies to define the concepts of the future. His work has been widely exhibited and got viral success online, including Hyperreality, who was awarded Vimeo's Best Drama on 2016. Listen to these episodes to learn how a dystopian prediction almost became true.
This video has got 10 million plus views across different social media. That's one metric that people use to quantify and define their own identity.
A different approach to controlling your creative process assisted by AI.
I think the question then is what do you want to retain and what do you want to kind of give away?
Keiichi's take on how AI and XR can generate value.
Education is a great place to start because the agent doesn't have to have any particular tools other than just to be able to answer your query with a response.
And his surprising approach when staying up to date with AI tech.
My secret is...
But before we get into it, I want to thank our sponsor Cognitive 3D who made this episode possible. Cognitive 3D is a spatial analytic platform to improve how organizations can analyze users' behavior in VR and AR and turn the findings into actionable insights. Cognitive 3D has a handy SDK that integrates easily in Unity and Unreal. Data are collected and displayed in 3D contextually to help you improve user engagement and retention. Whether you are designing training and simulation, running consumer research, or creating games and entertainment content, Cognitive 3D will change the way you track and learn from your data. Head to cognitive3d.com to learn more. And now, let's roll the title and welcome Keiichi on stage. Hi, Keiichi, it's a pleasure.
Thanks, Gabrielle. It's a big pleasure to be here as well, talking to you finally.
Indeed, that's great. And I think we stumbled on each other, and I didn't even know that you were at first the creator of Hyperreality, because I've seen it always repurposed by everyone when depicting this dystopian future. So when you showed it to me, I was like, oh, you were the one that made it? We need to talk. So I think it's great.
Yeah, it's great. That project has been such a kind of gateway for me for so many interesting conversations across many different industries and walks of life. And I guess now the technology is arriving to be able to really make that happen. And, we don't have to make films. We can make these as real things. Then, I guess the stakes got raised because I'm, very dedicated to making sure that this dystopian vision doesn't happen. But, to be able to do that, we have to figure out what we do want instead. So I think that project is a great touch point, and I'm glad that it's still something that is in people's minds and people remember, even though it was from way back in 2016. Yeah.
That's a long way. That's a long way ago. And I think the best way to start this off is let me show this so that people know what is that we're talking about. And then we're going to start with some very interesting question, because I am very curious what led you to come up with something like this. So let's play it, a small bit of it, and then we'll go back.
Fantastic. Great. Nice. Great.
Más tarde. Apúrate si quieres una buena calificación.
Voy lo más rápido que puedo.
¿Has pensado en correr? Es saludable y eficiente.
Seguro que no hay más trabajos disponibles. Yo estudié para ser profesora y estoy haciendo mercados.
Y además puedes quedarte con los puntos de fidelización. Eres una monkey afortunada. Tienes que confiar en la aplicación. ¿Te sientes inspirada? Gracias. Chao.
¿Quién soy yo? No, eso no es lo que quiero decir. ¿Para dónde voy? No. Puedo volver a empezar. Olvídalo.
Estoy presente ahora. Me amo.
So this is just the start. And from there, it just gets weirder and weirder. And I encourage everybody to actually really check it out. My first question is, why depict such a dystopian future nobody would want?
That's a great question. Well, I mean, there's many people you could ask that question to, of people, writers or filmmakers who intentionally, try to reach for the kind of darker pattern or excess that we can go to as a way of being able to kind of warn against it, or be able to try to alert people to the possibilities of what happens if we just sleepwalk into the future without really, trying to question what it is that's being built. My intention with Hyperreality, though, was never to make kind of a dystopian film. I actually just was interested in exploring the possibilities of these types of technology and what happens when you bring them into our reality, when they become a thing that people are just used to, that they're wearing all the time, some kind of interface to be able to see through into these virtual layers of content. What is that world going to look like? That's always been the interesting thing for me. I started to kind of make these concept films around 2009 while I was still in architecture school. And I was very interested at that point that there was this kind of crossover between the possibilities of emerging technology and the design of spaces, which was my discipline, still is my discipline. So, I think for me, it was very exciting to start to work on that kind of combination of the physical and virtual coming together. And as soon as I started to work on it, I realized that, okay, what we're doing is we're taking all of the different possibilities around network culture, around, the possibilities, the business models, the kind of content from the internet, and we're bringing them into our daily, everyday experience. The best way I can think of it is that all of the things that exist on your computer screen, or on your phone screen, or any way that you interact with these things, suddenly that becomes unleashed from those frame, like limiting frame, and they start to become spaces that you can exist in with other people, that you can interact with, and every different action that you do there is recorded, necessarily recorded and monitored by the system to be able to, properly locate you within that. But what does that also mean for society when, business models start to generate around that as well? So the world of Hyperreality, and the films that came before it, a couple of other short films before it, were really around trying to kind of explore the consequences of what happens when that develops. And very quickly I started to see, I don't know if it's my personality or just, it seems like the obvious thing, that it's so easy to then jump on top of that and monetize it, right? It's a marketer's dream. Anybody who's involved in any form of kind of, surveillance capitalism or anything within this kind of umbrella, it's the ideal tool, because it's always with you, and it's able not only to record or understand what you're seeing, but it's also able to influence you in terms of what you perceive. So, that becomes a very powerful and very dangerous tool that could be exploited in many different ways. And so I think, Hyperreality ended up being a dystopia because it tried to connect with not the weird things that happen, not like a science fiction alternative future, but something that we could really see, or I could really see happening with the current trajectory of technology.
So it is a sort of warning to people, to society. This is where we could end up, and let's start talking about it, and let's bring under people's attention, because it's not just monetization, as you mentioned. I think there is also a lot about identity, who we are, because that is one of the aspects that evolves during the story and gets more and more tangible to the viewer. Like, how did that element of identity comes into play in the story? Maybe for people that haven't seen it, you can give a brief description.
Well, yeah, the central character, Juliana, is kind of, she is trained to be a teacher, but now she's basically working for an app that gives her tasks to do. And in the film, it depicts one of the tasks where she's just going shopping to the supermarket for somebody. So she gets kind of dispatched out to these different locations. And I think through the film, you get the sense that she doesn't really have much of a social life or personal life. And all of her kind of daily motivations and interactions are guided by this interface that kind of forms her entire view of the reality of the world. And the story is kind of a redemption story where she's able, by the end of the film, to actually let go of the kind of particular metrics that are put upon her, or the expectations that are put on her, and is able to find a new path in life through the Catholic Church. But it's just it's not a religious film. I just was very interested in the interplay of identity and belief, and the way that society is constructed, and the way that the technology becomes this very powerful intermediary force in kind of guiding our behavior, guiding our identity, and how we see ourselves. And again, I'm not trying to be like wacky, crazy, far future science fiction here. I believe those metrics are already firmly in place. And you mentioned that this video has got 10 million plus views across different social media. That's one metric that people use to quantify and define their own identity, right? Okay, I'm a viral content producer. I must get X amount of views or likes or subscriptions. Otherwise, it questioned my value as a human being. So yeah, the film, I guess, on outside of the technological kind of layers of it, it tries to kind of focus on how we define belief systems in society, and how we what control we can exercise through that.
And I think this is actually something that people, especially the one that have seen just the initial bit of the video, have completely missed. Because you just see, dystopian content where there is commercials everywhere. This is kind of like the immediate connection that people draw, right? Because they read it, they saw it, they didn't go through the whole 6 minutes. But I think what you brought up is highlighting this fact of identity and how we are associated with numbers. And it's not even a dystopian future, as you mentioned. It's something that is already here.
Yeah.
Right.
Just another thing, like I didn't really set out to make this a dystopian film, and I don't think it is fully dystopian. I hope that there are lots of ideas and things that are in the film which do have like this kind of positive potential as well. So really, I was just trying to extrapolate, try to identify the things that were already happening in the way that we use technology, and just try to extrapolate what's the next level of that, what's the next level of that, and look into each of those different areas and try and focus on that. And the fact that people found it dystopian is very interesting, right? That without going in to try and make something that was particularly dystopian, people ended up being like, well, actually, hang on, even though, there are all these ad companies building this technology, maybe we don't want ads in that world. Maybe the way that ads work is kind of broken in that world. So I think that's very important to look at and identify. So I don't really consider it just like a warning, but also kind of a tool to try and understand, like, what are the areas of the user experience overall that we're neglecting, or that need more kind of fundamental change or a bit more focus to look at. So I think that's one of the real powers of doing this as a film. You're able to bring so many different areas that are currently being developed together, and try and look across holistically and understand what is the overall impact of that to the user, but also to society in general.
Absolutely. And I want to show a couple more examples while we go through this conversation. And I want to get back to the kind of like making of, because the art of making those short films, it's an art in its form, right? How do you get there? How do you come up with those ideas? How do they turn into what we see on screen? I want to touch that on later, but after that, one of the other that you made was Merger, right? Another piece. And before we start talking about it, I again want to show those short clip that comes from this video.
Things were so much simpler when people ran the corporations. But at some point, the algorithms just became better at it. They started mutating, growing out of control. It's becoming impossible to compete. I tried to track them, but they're so complex. The truth is, no one really knows what's going on.
This is another very, very strong bit from the whole film that, again, I think everybody should watch. And AI right now is seen very often or portrayed, framed as an assistant. So my question is, where do you draw the line between AI being an assistant and actually doing one's job? What's your take on it?
Super interesting question. And, of course, the jobs that we have now are not the same jobs that we had 100 years ago. We've got like many new disciplines being created all the time. So whenever you have this kind of disruptive change happening, whether it's technology inspired or something else, you always have to go through this period of readjustment. And again, I guess like with hyperreality, it's about trying to question what is the relationship that we want there. Because I think, there are many people on one side saying, yeah, AI is going to be ultimately like a force for bad, and try to resist it or try to slow down the pace to allow society more time. Other people think, we should just race towards the future as fast as possible, and then let the chips fall where they may, and we can try and find out the new society beyond that thing. But for me, I think, as a designer, I always want to test it. I want to prototype it. And one way we can do that is through making films that make people feel something, or make people react to it in a way that isn't an intellectual or tribal way, but a way that just allows them to understand their own feeling towards it. I think Merger focused on the idea of an AI not as like your little robot buddy that follows you around, but that AI has actually become part of our corporations and part of our institutions, and is become so enmeshed or merged together that there's no real way to understand what is AI and what is the kind of infrastructure anymore. So it's not an AI that talks even. It's like it's about like the merger with the economy, if you know what I mean. So I guess the idea is that you could have, for example, if you have a small team of people you work with, you could start to add staff member who is actually AI, and then those start to speak to each other, and then you can grow to have like a larger team which is part human, part AI, and then you could actually start to kind of mix those together with each other and allow the AI to be able to communicate across different institutions and companies. And eventually you have this kind of rise of a super intelligence, which is completely and inextricably linked with our economy and with our society, but in a way which isn't really addressable or understandable by any one human. So I found that, that film, I think I shot it or wrote it in 2015, 2016, finished production, released in 2017, I think. And at that time, it was this really, I saw this very strong trend happening that AI is like really coming with a vengeance and something big is going to happen. And I wanted to think about what is that connection? What is the interface between human beings and AI? And I think Merger shows that the sort of enormity that people are currently really grappling with, right? Like, how do you understand or try to control or understand, what your relationship is with that thing? And I think that's the source of why there's fear or uncertainty around it, is because we don't know what that interaction looks like. So I think following that, maybe we're going to talk about Agents, my other AI film, which is from this year, which proposes a very, very different model of engagement with AI.
Yeah, and absolutely. So we are certainly going there. One question that there were two important points that you brought up is that the fact that us as human, how do we understand, right? And how do we understand and keep up with such complex system that emerge? And the sentence that the character in Merger said at the end, it's like a black box. Nobody knows what is happening in there. So, I mean, you as a creative, as a designer, right, as an individual, how are you coping up with that? So much involved into this. How do you understand and try to make use of AI right now?
Well, I mean, obviously since making Merger, then this AI revolution began, and everyone is now figuring out lots of ways of integrating that into their workflow or their daily life, whether they're a designer or any different industry. I think it's affecting so many different things, and there's always different opportunities. And I guess what I realize is that it's not one big super intelligent interconnected system. It's tons of just new tools and processes that we can use, and those one day may be start to get linked up, and you start to see the sort of emergence of this more general intelligence. But until then, we also have tons of amazing new tools and things that we can use to create content. So we're very interested about how we can use AI to make new different types of experiences that haven't been possible before. And I think throughout all of my work, the thematic focus is around like thinking about the consequences of these technologies, but we also try and use those technologies to be able to make the work in the first place. So it's kind of a sort of cycle of using the technology to critique itself. Yeah.
Yes, and really from your personal perspective, right? How do you manage to cope up? Because a part of understanding like what this is capable of and how this thing can be connected is experiencing, building, getting informed. I personally recently, I have such a backlog of things that I should try out. And you know me, right? I like to tell little stories about how tools work, how those tools can be used to tell stories, because that's something that I love, how technology can help creatives. But I just cannot cope up, because every other day there is a new tool that looks very promising. That is something easy to use and it's on a Hugging Face. You can just go there and try new things. And people adding real-time kind of like stable diffusion to all their tools right now, kind of feature. So how do you do it? Maybe you can share a tip with me and maybe with everybody
Well,
listening.
I think my secret is that I don't keep up at all. It's not, I don't try to stay on top of what the recent tool is unless it's something that I'm really focused on working on. Generally what happens is it's like, what do we want to build first, which of course means that you need to have a general understanding of what's possible. But when it comes to like specific tools, it's really around trying to find like what is going to be the best for the job. So, I mean, I did a talk in Japan just last week, and I wanted to show the agents film, but with I noticed that I saw somewhere that you can do kind of lip redubbing, and so it can look like the character who's on screen is actually saying the words in the native language rather than, so it's doing a lip sync. It's also changing the lips themselves. So just had an idea that could be possible, and then I worked with Emily on my team. She was researching some of those different models and made a few different tests, and not through her fault, but because of the state of the technology, it was completely horrific and very interesting and funny. And we realized that that's not ready yet. And so I think, having a general state of where things are going and what things might be possible, and then finding opportunities to work on that and connect them with your work and your projects and the things that you're interested in, and then just evaluating the technology as you go, I think is the most sane way to deal with it. Because if you just try and put every new thing into your project, that's not going to stop with AI. It's going to become, your project is going to become a complete mess with any new thing you find in it. So yeah, I mean, even sometimes I have to like turn myself off from new influence in social media when we're in like deep production, because if there's a new thing that does something better, I don't want to know about it at that stage, right? It's too late for this project. So
I just wanted to have a quick break to remind you that the recording of these episodes and many more great conversations with incredible experts are available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Just head over to my profile or the episode description, open up the link in bio, and pick your platform of choice. And now, let's get back to the show. And you mentioned a few times agent. So I think now it's the time to actually show again a piece of it. And again, for everybody listening, I really encourage you to go back, check Hyperreality, check Merger, and then also check now Agents, because what you see is just really a tiny clip and you will lose a lot of the core story behind it. But let's first play Agents, and then I also have a question about it.
Resolution good. Chaos factor still too high. Any ideas, Coda?
We could try texturing using a diffusion model.
Okay, try me.
Name?
Save as glitchy test version.
Ready.
Okay, glitchy. Let's see if we can get this right this time. Run Rapunzel. Stop. Still too random.
Hey, Coda. Rename. Glitchy final version.
All set.
Render Rapunzel.
So one of the messages that I've got from agents was the meaning of control, and I was wondering: is control a tooling problem, a training problem, or a human problem?
Wow, what a question! A tooling problem, a training problem, or a human problem?
Yes, and when I say tooling, it's the tool, how it behaves, the training, the data that are fed into the models, or a human problem, whether we cannot control it, we want to control it, it's our own expectations that are not being met. What is control when we are generating with AI?
It's such an interesting question, and also, yeah, very, those kind of themes around control are also very present in Merger. So it's nice to see that kind of connection between them. Like Agents presents kind of almost the opposite worldview from Merger, where instead of AI being this all-powerful, all-knowing, kind of almost godlike kind of figure, we have a complete inversion of that, where the agents are small, they're limited, they're like relatable, they're much less kind of powerful in and of themselves, but they're kind of enmeshed into human relationships in human society. So what you saw in that little clip there, which just showed a little bit from the beginning and a bit from the end of the film, was Maya, who's a kind of, we talk about her as a writer, like a story writer, but in her job, she makes these agents, which are little AI-powered characters that you can experience, you can view them through AR glasses, but they have their own kind of intelligence and their ability to be able to do things in the world. So you see Glitchy, who is Maya's current project, and she's making Glitchy to be able to develop these 3D scenes. But there are agents for everything in this world. There are like navigation agents that can take you from one place to another. There are like local guide agents that can introduce you to local things, like things to do in your local area. There's like a waiter agent. Actually, I think we cut from the final edit, but there's someone to take your order. So we can kind of imagine that all of the different apps and the things that you might have on your phone now have a life as these animate characters that live in our society with us, and you can see and talk to, and maybe share with other people as well. So it tries to kind of have a different way of thinking about the way that we interact or control computers, but with a kind of AI right at the center of it, and combining these two kind of technology tracks of XR and AI together to create something which feels hopefully very obvious. That we've had these mental models of talking with spirits or ghosts or characters that kind of haunt or exist in our world, and it's very easy to explain to a child or an adult that this light behind me has a life attached to it, and I can actually commune with that light and ask it to turn itself on when I come into the room, or connect it with other kind of gods or little creatures that can work together to run the world. So it moves that level of control down from something which is hugely networked and kind of unknowable, and it presents itself to human beings in a way that we can understand, which is through these kind of social relationships. So the interaction with an agent or like an app might look exactly like the interaction we're having right now.
And one thing that Maya does is that at the beginning of the story, is asking Glitchy, hey, make a scene. And then at the end, a series of events happens, and I don't want to spoil because you should really check the full video. At the end, she accepts that she doesn't have control over the process, and that the final outcome is actually, it's not even about good enough, it's just about different. It's so my question about control is about using this AI this generative AI as part of our creative process, are we approaching the fat of control about having what we really aim for from a standard process the same thing, or we should readapt the way we approach this tooling and our way of being creative?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think so many of the tools that we've had until now have focused a lot around precision and being able to, draw the exact same, thing that you want to, for example. And, I come from background in architecture where the tools are, very prescriptively so like about that. But I think recently we start to shift from trying to, basically draw or represent the final outcome yourself to more of a situation of it being more procedural or programmatic, that there is this kind of layers of automation that happens in between. So in architecture, there are many different solutions now where rather than having to delete and redraw every single column in your building layout when you want to change something in the servicing or change the wall width or something like that, you can just have it kind of understand those behaviors on top of it. So, we're kind of working already with this process of automation. And when we move to a more automated level, then we necessarily take away some of those user control and some of those user action. I think the question then is like what do you want to retain and what do you want to kind of give away? And so one of the things that the film proposes is this kind of ecosystem model whereby there can be many different agents who can do things at different levels. And it might be that I want to have a very specialized way of organizing my big collection of I don't know, classical music or something. Or I might just want the kind of classical music for dummies, you just come in and I'm just going to get a nice introduction to it with an easy interface. And I think by making it into an ecosystem where you have developers who can make these different agents with different levels of specialization, we can replicate the way that we've currently done that before by giving the user the choice to be able to say, do you want to have the fine-grained control version, or do you want to have the more kind of general option, which is going to give you better results, unless you really want something particular.
Yeah, so extra specialized agents, even for the same task, even
Sure.
for the same goal, that is organizing things, that could be like different grades of agents and approach to it for different people as well. Another thing that is actually shown also in the video.
Why should I want
how
to
different
rely on Google Maps agent to tell me about a local area? Maybe there are different apps or services, or even local people with user-generated content who could give me a different and more relevant perspective on that same problem space. So I think, in the film, there's a main character who was not in the sample one, who's this agent who kind of can do everything, but does everything in a very kind of, generalized way. So I think, being able to try and think about, as human beings, what we want our future existence on with technology to look like, how much do we want to kind of hand over to these generalized processes versus trying to kind of retain some parts of it. So again, I think like Hyperreality, like Merger, it's a film that tries to kind of lay out a possibility. And my great kind of interest in doing these types of projects is to get the reaction from people and like understand if this is something people do want, because I think ultimately the best way to kind of avert a dystopian idea about the future taking hold is to present a version which tries to tackle those problems head on and comes out with something that people do actually want. And I feel like if you've got that, then people will build it.
So Keiichi, one thing, so these videos, these stories have let's say a lot in common. One of the things that stood out for me once looking at that several times was the fact about they're all great exercising storytelling and speculative design. So can you get us through the process? How do you come up just with the story, with the mood board for something like this?
So, I mean, with different films, they have kind of different focus. And I think generally we try to start with trying to understand what are the kind of trajectory of the technology. Where do we think things are going? And what are the kind of assumptions that people have made in the industry or, in media around what this technology looks like? So I think that's often the start of thematic investigation, right? What is the sort of general premise that we're trying to react on or react against? And then I think a lot comes from that is quite organic. Like for Hyperreality, and merger, I kind of focus a lot on particular moment that just come for something. For example, in hyperreality, there's a scene where the character is holding a yogurt, in the supermarket, and she sees different packaging on the yogurt depending on who she is, right? So if the system glitches out and temporarily thinks that she's somebody else, and then the packaging changes. And that was just kind of an idea that just kind of generally, I was looking at kind of like razors, like for like shaving, and noticed that they had like different version for men and women that had a completely different packaging and different kind of thing, but essentially it's exactly the same product. And I kind of found it sort of slightly kind of insulting that that marketing would work in such a way that tries to kind of define who we should be to use a product. And that kind of fed a lot into the theme of what hyperreality was about overall. So in that case, it kind of came through a particular moment. And with Agents, we actually worked with a writer, Yimika, who was like fantastic to work with. We worked with him on a couple of other projects as well. And that was really awesome because he brought basically a whole kind of dramatic arc with characters that felt kind of well-rounded. And then it was a matter of then trying to fit in all of these different ideas around the world building. For me, there has to be a kind of dramatic arc or dramatic narrative for the audience to feel emotionally invested. But the thing that we're trying to achieve with the film is not just to show them like a piece of somebody's life. It's really to use that dramatic arc as a kind of structure to put all of the world building around. And the world building for me is where the actual story is told. Because, there, in these futures, there are millions of lives playing out, and we're just choosing to focus on one particular person's story. And we have to have that, but what we want to do is to show the other possibilities, to show the other life, and to make the world feel really cohesive and complete. So I think that's the kind of the process, I guess, to try and identify the main themes, try to find a character or some situation that lends itself to exploration of those themes, and then as we go, then just layer in more and more details and observations until you have the kind of density. For me, density is very interesting and important as an aesthetic in my work. I like to have things that you don't catch on your first view, that you might not even get after watching it a few different times, or maybe if you're a particular specialization, like the way I talk about this with different people depending on their background and industry is also extremely different. So that's very rewarding for me, because I feel that I've done a job then as a designer and world builder to be able to create these worlds that feel very complete.
You mentioned one thing that I didn't, I wouldn't have described it like that, but it's about density. I mean, I realized, for example, myself, that when the character of Hyperreality asks who I am, one thing that appears is like how many friends she has on the top right. And then there is a little flash, like get more friends. Something that will be, that I noticed, I think the third or the fourth time that I actually watched it. And I realized that are the things that kind of like hook you up. And then you realize that makes it's not like a social media video. It's really it's more than a short movie. You really need to rewatch it several times to appreciate and discover the various layers. So really, really appreciate it. And the other thing also is that I personally, maybe it's just only by creating those dense words and that are rich and believable, it's when you can really spark a dialogue. Because that is also the other aspect that this kind of content really does, and it's a trigger to attract attention, but to get people to start talking. Because after watching Agent, I was there at dinner with my wife, and I was like, I've seen this movie, and it's like, imagine if you have something like this that happens, and we had a conversation about this would work. And that's really, really, I think when a content of this type does its job, it is really the sparking the conversation.
It makes me very happy to hear that.
So, but I mean, this sounds like all speculative, but I think that we are in here more than what we think, right? I mean, one of the things why we connected is actually this piece that you also work on was a Meet Wall, right? Is this mixed reality actually. It works on mobile and it works on on a headset. So it's like a mixed reality owl that can appear in your room that is powered by AI. So you can have a conversation about the forest in which he lives, about mushroom and so on. And I think this is where we see those two technology, XR and AI, really merge and collide right now, not like in 10 and 50 years in some weird ways. This is happening right now. So my questions, looking especially at Wall, is how do you think XR and AI best can complement each other?
Well, I think, the Agents film is really about laying out what that interaction can look like long term, where you have agents that are able to not just speak to you and, give you kind of, be kind of relatively passive, although you're able to talk to it. It cannot actually do anything in the world. We're going to move to a point where agents then have tools and can start to actually do things on your behalf or talk to other agents and do these different kind of activities, and they become much more powerful. But in the moment, we're still able to achieve a surprising amount of agent interaction. So we wanted to focus at the beginning on building a prototype as a project that could basically prove out the idea that you could combine XR and AI together in this character that you can speak to and have like a convincing conversation with them, voice to voice, feeling of presence, and actually do it for a purpose, right? We'd seen some really fun and inspiring projects that were around, bringing these kind of agent to life, either mixing like LLM with like a robot, or with, there was a great one from Looking Glass, Uncle Rabbit, I think is a classic, which is like a kind of sassy rabbit that you can talk to, and it just kind of wisecracks back at you. But we thought it would be very interesting to combine that with the idea of education and thinking about how there are new forms of learning that we haven't really explored yet that this could be perfect for. And people talk, I think myself as well, a lot of my use of like ChatGPT is around, learning about things, bouncing back and forth ideas, or testing out stuff, or getting examples of things, or understanding process, or, many, many different things that you can use to be able to increase your own learning, and being able to make that more approachable and something that is more inspiring to talk to rather than just a command line, just a empty text box. We thought, like, by developing a character that has a specialist kind of knowledge around the forest and its characters, then it's going to guide you better to be able to have this experience where you can learn something about it. And actually, I think, if anyone's interested to try it, I would definitely, recommend go to meetwall.com. You can play it on your phone or on the headset. But before, watch Gabriel's amazing video that he shot before, which I think is still one of the nicest like encounters. It's better than all of our documentation that we did of it. It feels so fresh, and Will gives some great answers, and the whole thing is very nice enough.
Great, thanks. So would you say that then, like, education is where XR and AI can complement each other, or do you see maybe on a short midterm some other opportunities for this technology to actually generate extra value?
Yeah, I mean, education is a great place to start, because we can have these kind of specialist knowledge, and the agent doesn't have to have any particular tools other than just to be able to answer your query with a response. The kind of world that you see in the agents film, though, is when the agents start to get more sophisticated, and you can add more different functionalities and behaviors and tools basically on top of that. So I'm very excited about both of those opportunities. I think, for us as Liquid City, my studio, we're focusing a lot around, trying to think about how to build out this world of agents and make, try to find new avenues and the kind of use cases which can support the early development. And then beyond that, I really believe that like agents could become the thing that replaces all these annoying hanging rectangles in the air that I'm pressing buttons on. It doesn't really feel like the future of computing to me. But something where we live within this kind of spirit world where AI and humans can kind of intermingle and support and help each other. And that process is contributed to by people as well. People are able to make those things, make their own GPTs. I really feel like that's a more positive vision for the future. So I'm very interested to discuss that. Yeah.
Keiichi, I really wanted to thank you very much for sharing all your thoughts and experience. And I think it's going to be a bright, exciting future when it's about merging these two technologies. So thank you very much for being here.
Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, there's so many different projects, prototypes, things that we're building in the real world that explore these themes as well. So I was really happy to have a chance to focus on the films today, and maybe we can do one next time with the prototypes as well.
Let's do it. So follow Keiichi for some more of these concept prototypes and experiments. Follow me if you want to get to know more again around how creatives and technologies can use in order to augment their own power and get more creatives. And again, Keiichi, thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Thanks, Gabriel.
Thank you really much for listening in. And remember to head to YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts and check out more insightful conversation revolving around XR and AI. And if you really like the show, please leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or a thumbs up on YouTube. It really helps me keep doing this and shine the spotlight on the latest and greatest advancement in XR and AI. Till next time.